Silver broke ranks with gold, and it broke hard. While gold dug in its heels and refused to give much ground, silver turned around and fell off a cliff, giving back a huge chunk of everything it had gained. Two metals that everyone lumps together, that the financial channels talk about in the same breath, just went two completely different directions at the same moment. And most people watched it happen and had no idea what they were actually looking at. So let me tell you the answer to the question in the title right now, before I prove a single word of it. What silver did that gold flatly refuse to do was collapse. Gold held. Silver cracked. And that is not a sign that silver is broken, or that the story is over, or that you were wrong to own it. It is the single most predictable thing silver does, the one behavior it has repeated for as long as these two metals have traded. And if you understand why, this whole frightening episode turns into something else entirely. The divergence is not the bad news. The divergence is the tell. Here's the fact I want you chewing on before we go one step further. Silver is a thin market. Tiny, really, next to gold, and a rounding error next to stocks or bonds. It is a narrow doorway, and when a crowd tries to run through it in either direction, people get crushed. That thinness is why silver rises faster than gold when the mood turns hot, and falls harder than gold when the mood turns cold. Same doorway, both ways. If you own silver and you did not understand that going in, this drop probably scared the daylights out of you. By the end of the next few minutes, it is going to make sense. I have been in the gold and silver world a long time, and I have watched this exact movie more than once. So let me take you inside the last time silver did something truly unforgettable, because the lesson lives in there, not in this week's screen. Go back to the end of the 1970s. Picture a machinist, a real one, a man who worked metal with his hands and understood the difference between something real and something printed. He had watched the dollar in his own paycheck buy less bread and less gas every single year of that decade. He was angry and he was scared, and he started buying silver coins, a tube at a time, out of the back of a shop. For a stretch there, he looked like the smartest man in his town. Silver did not just go up, it went vertical. Over that great inflationary run, silver rose something on the order of 8 times over, a move so violent it drew in dentists and plumbers and school teachers, whole neighborhoods lining up outside coin shops with their grandmother's flatware in a shoebox. And here is the part that matters for you today. Gold ran too, hard, from the low tens of dollars an ounce back when the gold window was open to over $800 at the top. But silver ran farther, faster, wilder. The thin market amplified everything. When money poured in, it had nowhere to go, so the price simply exploded. Then came the turn. And this is where our machinist learned the lesson written into silver's DNA. When the top gave way, gold came down, but silver came down like a safe dropped off a roof. In a matter of a couple of years, silver gave back the overwhelming bulk of that historic run, and it did it far more brutally than gold did. The very same thin market that had launched it into the sky slammed it into the ground. Same doorway, both directions. That machinist, if he bought near the top and sold in a panic near the bottom, got wiped out by the second half of a move that his own greed had helped create in the first half. Now sit with what that really teaches, because it is the whole point of this video. Silver's wildness is not a bug. It is the animal. Gold is the heavy, slow, sovereign metal, the one central banks hoard in vaults and revalue by decree. Silver is the lean, nervous, half-industrial cousin that lurches. When you see silver fall much harder than gold, you are not seeing a broken market. You are seeing silver be silver. And once you accept that, the fear turns into information, because now the widening gap between the two tells you exactly where you are in the cycle. Let me put a real number on that gap. The durable kind, not this week's tick. When silver gets loved, the ratio between gold and silver compresses. Silver closes the distance, sometimes dramatically. When silver gets left for dead, that ratio stretches out toward the wide end of its historical range, and it has been sitting out near that wide end lately. In plain English, it now takes a large pile of silver ounces to buy a single ounce of gold, near the high end of what we have seen over decades. Every previous time that gap yawned open this wide, it did not stay there forever. It is a rubber band, and it has snapped back every single time. So why does gold hold while silver folds? This is the mechanism, and this is what the financial channels will not sit you down and explain. Gold has a buyer of last resort that silver simply does not have. The central banks of the world have been buying gold hand over fist, more than 1,000 tons a year for 3 straight years, roughly double the pace of the decade before. And even after cooling off a bit, that buying has stayed far above the old normal. Gold recently passed the euro to become the second largest reserve asset held by central banks on Earth, behind only the dollar. When fear hits, there is a giant, price-insensitive, patient bid underneath gold. Silver has no such friend. No central bank vaults silver as a reserve. So when the sellers show up, gold has a floor of sovereign buyers, and silver has open air beneath it. That is the divergence, explained in one breath. And if you want proof that silver moves on plumbing rather than on fundamentals, think back to what happened not so many years ago. The last time silver had run up near that famous ceiling. The exchange that governs the futures market simply raised the margin requirements, the amount of money a trader has to put down to hold a position. That is a mechanical lever, a piece of back-office paperwork. It changed nothing about the supply of silver, nothing about the demand, nothing real at all. And silver fell roughly a third in a matter of days. A third, gone in days, on paperwork. That is the thin market in one clean example. When you can move a metal that hard by adjusting a form, you're looking at a doorway so narrow that a shove from the right desk empties the whole room. Understand that, and the current drop stops looking like a verdict and starts looking like a shove. And I want to be honest with you about why those central banks stampeded into gold, because it is the most important lesson in this entire story, and it bridges directly into how you protect your own family. Not long ago, one of the largest powers on Earth had a huge slice of its national savings frozen with the flip of a switch. Reserves it thought were money, held as entries on someone else's books, as somebody else's promise, were simply turned off. Every finance minister on the planet saw it and had the same cold thought. What we hold as a promise can be taken. What we hold as metal in our own vault cannot. You cannot freeze a bar of gold sitting in your own possession. It has no counterparty, no politics, no off switch. That is why they accelerated their buying. And that is a lesson that does not only apply to nations, because it applies to you. And this is the right moment to tell you how ordinary American families are acting on that exact same insight. If you have $100,000 or more in a 401k or an IRA, most of what you own is a promise too, an entry in a system, a claim you are trusting somebody else to honor. We put together something called the Free Retirement Wealth Protection Guide, and it walks you through, in plain language, how retirees are moving a portion of the retirement account they already have into physical gold and silver, real metal, without taxes and without penalties, using what is called a self-directed precious metals IRA. This is not just for insiders or the wealthy. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, this is for you. If you are watching on your TV, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to readfamilyguide.com. From our family to yours, no obligation and nothing to buy. Now let me pick the thread back up because there is a live pressure on silver right now that you deserve to understand plainly. The Fed, under its current chair, Kevin Warsh, has turned notably hawkish, and it recently came out of a meeting deeply divided, with several regional bank presidents dissenting and open talk of a rate hike rather than a cut. The chair has called inflation a choice and said that letting it run above target is unacceptable. Now, silver hates that kind of talk in the short run. It is the more rate-sensitive of the two metals, part precious and part industrial, so a market that suddenly starts pricing in higher for longer, or even a hike, tends to lean on silver harder than on gold. Some of this drop is exactly that. It is real, and I am not going to pretend it away. But here is where it gets interesting, and this is the part almost nobody connects for you. That rate pressure is a mood. It is a headline, a sentiment, a positioning story, and it moves the thin silver market around violently precisely because the market is thin. What it does not touch, not one bit, is the physical reality of the metal underneath. And the physical reality of silver right now is one of the tightest setups I have seen in my years watching this space. Consider this. The silver market has now run a structural deficit for 6 straight years. 6 years in a row, the world has used more silver than it has produced, drawing down the above-ground stockpiles to cover the difference. And the demand doing the drawing is not sentimental, it does not check the Fed's mood, it does not care what the chart printed this morning. Every solar panel bolted onto a roof needs silver. Electric vehicles need silver. The electronics in your life need silver. And the enormous data centers being built out for artificial intelligence need silver. This is industrial demand that shows up whether the price is happy or scared. And the supply cannot simply answer the call. Here is a fact most silver owners have never been told. Most of the silver mined on Earth does not come from silver mines. It comes out of the ground as a byproduct of digging for copper and zinc and lead. So even when silver's price screams for more supply, the miners cannot just flip a switch and produce it, because silver is riding along on the back of other metals entirely. The supply is stubborn. It cannot ramp on command. That is the definition of a market prone to sudden, violent shortages. Then stack on the other side of the ledger the thing that makes silver so different from gold in the long run. Gold is hoarded, silver is burned. Nearly all the gold ever mined still exists, sitting in vaults and jewelry and coins because people treasure it and hold it. But silver gets used up, consumed, dispersed in tiny amounts across billions of devices, spread so thin across so many products that it is largely uneconomic to ever recycle back out. It is gone, consumed into the economy and not coming back. Century after century, the silver that gets used simply leaves the market forever. And the vaults that back the paper market are showing the strain. The registered inventory sitting on the futures exchange, the metal actually available to satisfy delivery, has been drawn down, and the free float of silver in the big London vaults has thinned out too. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, buyers have been pulling physical silver eastward so aggressively that at the stress points the price in Shanghai has traded at a premium to the price in London, a sign that somebody over there wants the real thing badly enough to pay up for it. Here is the uncomfortable truth underneath all of it. Far more paper claims on silver trade every day than there is deliverable metal to hand over. Most of the time that is a fine and quiet arrangement. But in a real shortage, when holders start asking for the actual metal instead of the paper promise, that arrangement is exactly how a thin market turns into a squeeze. Paper can suppress a price for a long time. Paper cannot conjure an ounce that does not exist. Now I promised you honesty, and here it is, the caveat before the case, the way I would say it to my own family across the kitchen table. I cannot tell you the day silver turns. I would be insulting you if I pretended I could. This is a thin, wild market, and it can absolutely fall further before it finds its feet, especially if the Fed keeps up the hawkish drumbeat and the mood stays sour. Anyone who tells you they know the bottom to the dollar is selling you something. This is a case built on structure and history, not a promise and not a guaranteed price. Silver can hurt you in the short run. That is precisely the price of admission for what it can do in the long run. If your stomach knots every time you check the screen, I understand that feeling completely, and the answer to it is not to panic. It is to understand what you actually own. Because when you hold all of that in your hand at once, the picture flips. A thin market that falls harder than gold on a mood swing. A structural deficit 6 years deep. A supply that physically cannot ramp. Demand from solar and electronics and AI that does not blink. And a metal that gets consumed and never comes back. Every one of those things is a coiled spring, and the drop everyone is afraid of has only wound the spring tighter. The thinness that is punishing silver on the way down is the very same thinness that will launch it on the way up. Same doorway. Both directions. Ask our machinist from 1980 which half of that move he wishes he had understood. And this is the part I really want the patient viewer to sit with because it is how these things actually turn. The people who move first in a market like this are not the ones you see on television. The largest, most sophisticated buyers, the ones who study physical supply and reserve risk for a living, tend to accumulate quietly during exactly this kind of ugly, discouraging, everybody hates it stretch. By the time silver's story is obvious enough to lead the evening news, by the time your neighbor and your barber are asking about it, the deep discount you are being handed today will already be gone. The whole advantage lives in seeing it while it still looks like a mistake. Right now it looks like a mistake to most people. That is not a warning. That is the opportunity, wearing an ugly mask. So let me be practical about your own position for a moment. Principles, not a prescription. Size what you own so that a shakeout like this one can never force you to sell. That is the whole game. The machinist did not lose because silver is bad. He lost because he was positioned so that fear could pry the metal out of his hands at the worst possible moment. Own real metal, not a paper claim on metal, because in a genuine squeeze there are far more paper claims floating around than there is deliverable silver to honor them. And never ever sell your insurance into the bottom of a panic. Insurance is worth the most precisely when it feels the worst to hold. Which brings me home, to you and to the family you are building all of this for. The reason to act while nothing feels urgent is that this decision is cheapest and easiest exactly when the crowd is looking away. And the crowd is looking away right now. That free retirement wealth protection guide I mentioned lays out how to move a portion of your retirement savings into physical gold and silver without taxes or penalties, so that what you spent a lifetime building and what your children and your grandchildren will one day inherit sits partly in something no bank and no switch can turn off. And for those of you with $100,000 or more who watch all the way to the end of this video, we also offer a free one-on-one educational web conference, no cost and no obligation. Just mention that you saw the whole thing. If you are on your TV, scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to readfamilyguide.com. From our family to yours. So here is your answer one more time, with everything we have walked through standing behind it. Silver did something gold refused to do. It fell hard while gold stood firm. And now you know that is not silver breaking. That is silver being exactly what it has always been. A thin and violent market that overshoots in both directions and hands its wildest gifts to the few people who understood the animal before the crowd did. The machinist from 1980 learned that the wildness cuts both ways, and it cost him everything to learn it late. You just learned it early, sitting right here. That is the whole difference. That is the entire game.